gaude goizeko 7:00 esnatzera ohituta, baina merezi zuen okasioak. Hiriburua baino herria izan zen Bilbo joan den larunbatean. Alternatiben Herria. Bestelako gizarte eredu baten alde ari direnen bilgunea, alegia. Eta bazen tartean eskoziar bat. Feminismoa erdigunean jarrita ari da estatu propio baten alde, eta oraindik lortu ez badute ere, Eskozia ez da inoiz lehengo bera izango. Independentziari begiratzeko beste modu bat erakutsi digu. Bide batez, Bilbon ambiente ederra zegoela-eta, tokia egin diogu ambienteko soinuari.
Challenge to neoliberalism unless you start to put gender at the centre. I think neoliberalism is a particular settlement of capitalism that relies on the exploitation of women increasingly, like in the global south, but also co-opts the language of feminism in the north. So, for example, you now have more women in politics, in top jobs, CEOs of companies. But that's at one end of the scale, and at the bottom you have more and more women trapped in precarious work, like low paid, like illegal employment. You have this at the bottom and it's expanding. So what we're trying to do, particularly in Rise, is organise women to be able to resist neoliberalism and kind of expand the ideas of feminism into the left. Because I think for a long time, the phrase I always think of when I was first getting involved in politics and was talking about feminism was, after the revolution, you know? Yeah. But you can't have a revolution unless you're putting feminism in the centre of your politics. During the referendum, it was women who led the campaign on the ground, like on the streets. It was women who were organising, who were putting on meetings locally, creating small pockets of debate, and I think that this has given like a kind of renewed confidence and consciousness to women. But I think we need to take it to the next level. I don't want to fight for an abstract equality that's just about representation. Do you know what I mean? We've got to marry it up with a fight against austerity. This is the big thing. In the UK, 75% of fiscal cuts have fallen on the shoulders of women. Women are being annihilated by austerity that's coming from Westminster. So at the same time that women are being empowered in the referendum, we need to give them ways to resist this attack that's coming from a government that most people in Scotland, hardly anyone in Scotland voted for. Is a very similar situation to what Scotland was like before the referendum. The left-wing organisations, trade unions only came together to march on the streets. During the referendum, we were up against the entire British establishment. So for over 700 days, every single newspaper sold in Scotland, apart from one that was published on a Sunday, supported the No campaign. So every single day, people were getting this message of, if you dare to vote yes, you will lose your job, your home, your pension. The only way for us to counteract that, we don't have a media empire, the only way for us to counteract that was to go and speak to people, to go and knock on people's doors, and that's what we did. And we wanted to take that message out, and we did, and it had a huge impact. Support for independence in Scotland has always been fairly marginal. I mean, for me, Scotland it's not an oppressed people. It's not like here or it doesn't have that same dynamic. So independence in Scotland, support has always been 20% roughly. So to go from 20% to 45% in 2 years is huge. The communities in Scotland that have been ignored for decades by the Scottish Parliament, by Westminster, that's where the message really stuck. So all the statistics show that basically it was a class issue at the end of the day. Like, working class people overwhelmingly voted yes. Young people overwhelmingly voted yes. Like, people who had been consistently shut out of the political discourse, suddenly there was this moment, this realisation. And I think that is because of the way that we ran the campaign from the very bottom up. Independence was about transformation. It was about ordinary people having a bit of control over their own lives for the first time. You know, these were the things that motivated people to go out and vote. Yeah, we didn't win the referendum, but there's no doubt that Scotland's changed forever. Like, things are never going to be the same again. And so out of the Radical Independence campaign, you know, we've created RISE, which is, we wanted to be a political expression of that independence movement, which is left-wing and anti-war and anti-Trident. But I think that social movements like that, they need new doors to open, new ways of expressing itself. Otherwise the momentum can die. You know, it can tail off. So this is why we created RISE, so that next year for the Scottish Parliament elections, there is an option on the ballot paper that represents everything that happened over the last few years. I think it's really important, because next time round, we need to be able to harness that energy again. So if it dies off now, then we're never going to win it. Scotland, like now, particularly like towards the end of the referendum and afterwards, there's been a blossoming of new media. So there are new media organisations. There's a new national newspaper which is pro-independence. You know, it comes out every single day because people saw, you know, the media sided with the establishment, overwhelmingly so. So there was a need for a new type of citizens journalism, so that's been massive. But also I think for the left in Scotland, we've developed a new way of talking about our ideas that people actually see their reality reflected in. I think that it's probably the same all across Europe, but the days of talking about the proletariat or the bourgeoisie, like, this is finished. You need to speak in a language that people actually recognise. I think probably one of the best class-based slogans of the last decade is "We are the 99%." This idea that class is fluid, it's relational, and it captures the imagination. And this is what we're trying to cultivate right now in Scotland.